Welcome back to the Bustier YouTube channel. In today's class, we are going to learn how to make this beautiful double keyhole yoke bustier bodice. It's a very simple tutorial and it's beginner friendly. This is something you like to learn. Kindly stay tuned to the end of this tutorial. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to start by making our basic bodice pattern. So I have my pattern paper here. So the shoulder I'm working with is 14 inches divided by 2 is 7, sorry, and on that point I'm going to come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope. So tentatively my neck depth, my neck width measurement is 3 inches, and then from there I'm going to connect from my shoulder slope to my neck point for my shoulder slant. So from the starting point I'm going to take my shoulder measurement, my armhole measurement, which is 8.5, my bust point 10.5, under bust is 14, and my waistline is 18 inches. So all of these I'm going to make into a straight line. Okay, so this is a bustier pattern and we have done this severally on the channel, so I'm just going to quickly rush through it. So this has a yoke, as you can see, it has like a double keyhole yoke. So I'm going to mark out my armhole curve first. My bust is 10, that's 40 divided by 4, 10 inches, and then on that point I'm going to take my curve ruler and then mark my armhole line. So after marking my armhole line, I'm going to decide where my yoke is going to start from. It can start on your chest line, but for me I don't want it to start exactly on my chest line, so I'm going to go up a bit. So my yoke is going to be starting at around 6.5 inches from my starting point. So on that point I'm going to mark the 6.5 inches, and then I'll make that into a straight line so that that can be a guide for me. Okay, so this upper part now becomes my yoke. So the next thing is to mark my bustier pattern. The bust span, that's nipple to nipple, is 4 inches. So I'm going to mark that 4 inches. So I'm going to label this my armhole line, my bust point, my under bust, and my waistline. So now this center line I'm going to make it into a straight line, and then I'm going to take a dart of 1 inch on both sides on my under bust as well as my waistline, and then I'm going to connect them together. So after connecting it using my curved ruler, I'm going to connect this to my bust point on both sides. So to tighten my upper chest on this point where my yoke starts, I'm going to take 1/2 inch measurement on both sides. Then after taking the 1/2 inch measurement, using that same curve ruler, I'm going to connect it smoothly like this. Okay, so this is what we have, and all of these now are going up as my dart. Okay, so now we're going to work on her yoke. So depending on where you want the yoke to be, if you look at my thumbnail, you can see that it's not starting at exactly the center front area. So the first thing I'm going to do now is to mark 1/2 inch. Okay, so after marking the 1/2 inch, that's going to be the space between each of my yoke. Remember, it's a double keyhole, so if you want, you can start exactly here. If you want it to be included with your center front, so it means here when you are drawing your neckline, you can come up by around 1 inch so that you can draw your V neckline. But because mine is not going to get to my center front, it's like a separate yoke. That's why I'm marking the 1/2 inch, so that, remember, this is on fold. By the time I open it out, it's going to be 1 inch distance. So here now you can maintain the neck width measurement you have, which is 3 inches, but I want mine to be a bit higher, so I'm going to be working with 3.75. I'm adding 0.75 to that. So from there I'm going to connect my neckline, so you can see that it's a V neckline. So now to form the keyhole that we have on the yoke area, depending on how wide you want it to be, I'm going to try to play safe with mine. I don't want it too wide. So from this place where my neckline starts, I'm going to mark 2 inches. Okay, so here as well I'm going to just mark from my dart leg. I'm going to mark, you can actually work with whatever it is that you want, but I'm just trying to, I don't want it too wide. So this is my distance. So now I have a distance of about 2.5 inches for my opening, for the keyhole opening that I'm forming on my yoke. So now to know the height of the yoke from my chest line, I'm going to mark around 3.5 to 4 inches. Okay, so this is 3.5 from my starting point here, and then on that point I'm going to connect my yoke in form of a V shape, so you can see what I have. So this is the keyhole that is going to go out, and this is going to be the yoke that I will have. So remember, we're going to sew this yoke back to this part. So now that I took here is not going to make me have this exact same thing, so that I don't have any shortage. So this 1 inch, half an inch on both sides, I'm going to replace it back on this side. And after replacing it, I'm going to redraw my armhole line, so this way I'm not going to have any shortage. So the next thing is to take my circumference measurement. I already took my bust measurement. My waist is 30 divided by 4 is 7.5, so I have 3 inches here. I'm just going to move my tape because of the dart and then continue my measurement. So I have 7.5 inches here. I'm adding 1.5 inches seam allowance to that, and then I'm going to connect for my side seam. So after connecting my side seam, to tighten my under bust, I'm going to take a bust dart of 2 inches. So from my bust point, I'll mark 2 inches here, and then I'm going to connect it to my nipple point here. So that's going to be my bust dart, and this is also going to be taken out. Okay, so for the back, I'm working with a regular bodice. As you can see, you can also have a yoke for your back, but I'm just working with my regular basic. But this is my chest line, this is my waistline, and then I've taken my waist depth as well. This is my zipper allowance. So in this case, I'm working with a zipper, but you can also work with a lace up bar at the back, just like we have it on the thumbnail. So if you'd like to see a tutorial on that, let me know in the comment section, and then we'll make a tutorial. But for this, I'm just working with my regular zipper. So here I'm going to make sure that I use the same neck width that I used for the front, which is 3.75. remember, you have to join them together on the shoulder, so they have to be the exact same thing. So this is my neck point, and then I'll decide on the type of neckline that I want for the back. So I can also do a V. Okay, so I can do a V neckline, or you can do a keyhole neckline, or whatever neckline that you want basically. So effectively, this is what I'm going to go for. So this is my back pattern, and this is my front. Okay, so now I'm cutting this out. The first thing I'm going to remove is my yoke for the front. Okay, so please, when you are cutting, be mindful of this. Remember, we redrew our armhole. Okay, so please be mindful of that, so that you don't have any shortage on that point. So now I have this. I'm just going to close my bust dart. Okay, so now I have cut it. As you can see, my dart, I've closed my bust dart, and this is my yoke. Okay, so please, you can notch this half an inch part to know that your yoke does not get to your center fold. So now I'll go ahead and cut this on my fabric. So for my back as well, I have cut it out, and then I'm working with this V neckline, so I'm just going to cut it as well. Okay, so here is my pattern for the front, and this is my pattern for the back. So I'll go ahead and cut this on my fabric as well as the lining. So you had allowance where necessary. Remember, we're going to join this back to this, so you had allowances for joining, and then also I'm going to turn it on the neckline area. So I'll just add my required allowances. Okay, so I have gone ahead to cut it on my fabric. I'm using this Ankara fabric, and this is my lining. So this is the side front, and this is the center front. And you can see that I added allowance on the dart line as well as the upper part where I'm going to sew the yoke. So this is my yoke as well. I have added allowance on the lower part that I'm going to join to the lower bodice, and as well as my shoulder. I did not have allowance on my armhole and my neckline. So this neckline part I forgot, so I just got it. I'm just going to sew it tiny. So when you are doing your own, please do well to add allowance on your neckline. So this is my back. So I did not have allowance on the neckline of the back as well, so I'm not going to run into any problem or shortage when I'm joining my shoulder together. I added allowance on the shoulder line as well, and this is what it looks like. So now I'll start to sew it. So for the back, I'm just going to turn my lining with my main bodice okay, on the neckline area and the zipper, and then I'm going to hold my dart. So that's what I'm going to do for the back. So for the front, I'm going to join them together on the dart line, both the lining and the main fabric. I'm going to join them separately because I'm still going to use the lining to turn the yoke neatly. And then for my yoke, I have 4 pieces here, okay, 2 for each of the sides. So I'm going to use them to turn out each other. Okay, so this is what it looks like. So now I'll go ahead and sew it on the neckline area, and then I'm going to sew the keyhole as well. So I'll leave this lower part because I'm still going to turn it with my lining. So I just need to sew my neckline as well as the keyhole. So I'll go ahead and sew them and iron them neatly. So if you are going to be padding this, you need to pad with your wadding or whatever it is that you're padding with, and you can also add your ready-made backup. So you can also add bone to this pattern. So you can add boning on your dart line, you can add on your center front as well. You can work with regular boning that you can sew on it. So we have several tutorials on the channel on how you can add boning to your dresses already. So if you want to add boning to that, you can go ahead and do that. So I'll go ahead and sew this now, bring it back for us to see. So I've gone to sew it. You can see I just sew my neckline tying and then the keyhole area. So this place is opened for me to turn it out. So you notch it. When you are doing yours, you can add interfacing to it if you have, so that you can strengthen this yoke because of the turning that you're going to. So this curved part, I'm going to notch it to the closest point that I can so that it can turn neatly, and then I'll go ahead and iron it. So this is the back. I've turned it with lining, and then I held my dart as well. So this is the second side of the back, and these are my 2 front pieces. So this is the main bodice and this is the lining. So you go ahead and iron everything. So I have gone ahead to iron them. You can see how flat my yoke is lying now. This is my 2 yoke and this is my front bodice. So this is the lining for the front as well, and these are my 2 back panel. You can see that they are also ironed neatly. So now the next thing I'm going to do now is to sew the yoke to the upper bodice. So to do this, I'm going to take my upper bodice and put it on fold, and then I'm going to notch the midpoints. Okay, so this is the center point and I have notched it for reference. So now I'm going to bring in my yoke and then arrange like this. So remember when we were drawing it, we said the yoke did not get to the center front. So I'll measure like half an inch away from my center front and then place my yoke. So you can see that it is exactly the same because we added back whatever shortage that we envisaged we may have. So you can see what we have. So you do the same thing for the other side as well. You mark your half an inch and then you place your yoke. You can see that on the other side as well, it is exactly the same thing. So this is what the yoke looks like now, and then it has about 1 inch space in between them. So to sew it, I'm just going to flip like this and then take it to the sewing machine and sew. Okay, so you can hold it down with your pin first. So I have gone ahead to sew it, and this is what the yoke is looking like. So to cover up the rough edges, I'm just going to place my lining on top of it like this and then sew, so that by the time I flip it over, the lining will conceal all these rough edges for me. Okay, so I've gone ahead to sew them together now. So once you flip it, you'll see that your yoke now is in between your lining and your main fabric, and you must have turned it neatly like this. So I'll go ahead and iron it flat. So it is ironed now. The next thing is for me to bring in my back panel, and then I'll go ahead and sew. So I'll go ahead and join it on the shoulder, and then I'm going to sew it on the side seam as well. So I have gone ahead to sew it on the shoulder, as you can see. So this is the other shoulder, and then on my side I sew my main fabric separately from the lining so that I can have a clean finish like what you see. So this is what the inside looks like. Okay, you can see how clean it is on the inside, and this is the outer part. So now you can fix whatever sleeve of your choice to this. You can decide to fix your puff sleeve on the armhole area. You can leave it sleeveless. Just do whatever it is that you want with it. So I'll take this to the mannequin now so that we can see what it looks like. Okay, so this is what the bodice looks like on the mannequin. You can see our keyhole, and this is the 1 inch space between the yoke that we have, and this is the full view of the bodies. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed making this beautiful tutorial with me. If you enjoyed it, let us know in the comment section. Like, comment and subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.